Todd, thank you again for joining us today. Really excited for the conversation we're about to have. But before we get into that, I do want to give our listeners just a chance to meet you. I want to give them a chance to hear your background, your experience directly, what brought you to the For Good world, and then after all of these years, what's kept you in the For Good space.
Yeah, so I'd say I've been in the nonprofit space since basically I graduated college. I'd like to hide this, but if you Google me enough, you'll see it. I was a pastor for quite a number of years. I like to refer to myself. I was a local community builder. That just sounds a lot more, nonprofit centric. But honestly, our church functioned as a nonprofit in the ways that we serve the community. And so I was there for 14 years. I left that. That was in Philadelphia. I left that. We moved to Portland 9 years ago, and I immediately jumps into a nonprofit fundraising organization, much like you guys, as a technology company, much like Fundraise. Spent 2 years or so there, and it was phenomenal. I worked with nonprofits every day around fundraising, messaging, websites, crowdfunding, all kinds of stuff. And so I kind of really use that time to really kind of like get a good understanding of where I wanted to be. After I left there, I was laid off in 2015, I think it was. Spent a few years just consulting, then was a development director for a year here in Portland, and then started. I'd made the wise decision of starting a business a month before the pandemic hit, which was ended up being great, but it was a little nerve wracking for a little bit. So I've been consulting for the last. This will be my fourth year consulting now with nonprofits directly.
Todd, thank you for that background. It's so familiar to many of the conversations we have where people kind of fall into the For Good space. I know a lot of people, college and coming out of college, they don't necessarily understand all of the opportunities that exist professionally in the For Good world. The more we dig into it, the more we realize there are so many opportunities to function professionally in this space in any capacity, whether it's marketing or fundraising or leadership or delivering programs or even finance and accounting. And that's something that falls under the radar far too often and leads me into it really gives us a good transition point into the broader conversation I want to have with you today, because I know you're going to have a really cool perspective on this. Is a trend that I'm seeing and something that I really want to bring a voice to and bring attention to is this shift finally that's happening where our space, our sector is no longer accepting that nonprofit is an operating model. And I think it's about dang time that this comes to light. For far too long, too many organizations, too many nonprofit professionals have had to operate with this mindset of, I can't spend, I can't grow, I can't do this because that's not what a nonprofit does. When really nonprofit is a tax status and nothing more. We had a really cool conversation earlier this season on our podcast with an executive director who had implemented the EOS, Entrepreneurial Operating System, in her organization. And since that conversation, I've been seeing more and more of this come to light where nonprofit organizations are dumping the nonprofit operating model and adopting what traditionally has been for-profit operating models, which when it comes down to it, a nonprofit organization is a business, but the business is to deliver good, valuable impact in the world. So that was a very long-winded introduction to the conversation I want to have today. And I want to talk about how the sector is changing. And I want to use the term, and this is something that I'm committed to this year and beyond, is even as something as semantic as the way we talk about ourselves, changing the way we're not the nonprofit sector, right? That carries a connotation. I want even such a shift as like, hey, let's start calling ourselves the For Good sector, right? That's something to be proud of. There's value in that. I am bringing a good thing to the world because I work in the For Good sector, right? Do we have to call ourselves the For Good sector? Does it have to be those words in that way? No, but this idea of changing the mindset at which we operate, that's what I want to dig into with you today, Todd. Your wealth of background, both directly in leading organizations, but also peripherally, like many of us who've had a hand directly working at a For Good organization, but then also stepped out and said, hey, I've learned something. I take this and I see this as a potential and go and become a consultant or work at a peripheral company serving the sector. I'd like to dig in to that side of it. And so my first way I want to look at this is talking from a leadership perspective. Obviously, you were a leader at a for good organization, both in development capacity and in a marketing and communications capacity. So you have a really good perspective of what it's like to lead an organization. And this year, I feel like this year is going to be a big year of change in our sector. So I'd like to talk about what it's like to lead through change first today and kind of get your perspective on that. Hear a little bit about your experience of what it's like leading through change. What have been things where you're like, hey, this was a really unexpected but good thing, and opposite of that, this was an unexpected bump in the road that we really struggled with. So that way we can help the leaders and the people listening today be able to go like, hey, I remember Todd said this, or Todd went through this, and now I'm starting to step into it too. So let's just kind of dig in there.
It's interesting. I was just at my kid's basketball game last month and a couple weeks ago, and I overheard two people talking about nonprofits, and I heard one guy say to the other, he's like, yeah, they're a nonprofit. Their books have to zero out at the end of the year. That's what it means to be a nonprofit. They can't make any money. And I was just like, wait, what? Like, that's not how those nonprofits can't have savings. And I was like, that's not how that works. But there's so much misunderstanding around what a nonprofit is allowed to do and not allowed to, what's supposed to be. And this whole idea, like, even I will probably keep using the word nonprofit because it's just familiar. But your concept of saying it's the for good sector is super helpful because I've heard this in leadership all the time. You don't want to define yourself by what you are not. You want to define yourself by what you are, or like not what you don't do, but what you do, right? And so just the word nonprofit itself is just like it's not a great platform to start from. Which, well, we're a not. We are defining ourselves what we are not, other than what we are, which is a for good organization. Like, we exist for the good of the world. And I think once if you can change that shift, you can start talking about doing things things differently and being a little more aggressive with the work of that good work, rather than always having to worry about like what people think about whether we're going to keep our nonprofit status or not because we're spending too much money or whatever. So yeah, no, I am right on track with that. I don't know that I've thought about it that specifically, but I'm right on track with that.
That's awesome. And it's so funny, like that conversation, because by that logic, I mean, we're all here on the fundraise side. By that logic, for a long time, that would have made fundraise a nonprofit because we were, we
Right.
were a startup that had capital investment that allowed us to grow and deliver a valuable service to the sector that we served because someone or a group of people saw value in the goods and services we brought to the market. And
there are a lot of businesses that would be considered nonprofits because they're definitely not making money, or they're booked zero out at the end of the year. It's just such a misunderstood industry. I think from the world community side, like the way that the community looks at nonprofits, but also from the way the nonprofits then lead their nonprofits. I think there's misunderstanding, and then it just leads to some unhealthy practices and some unhealthy ways that we function as nonprofits.
Todd, that's a perfect segue into the next question I want to dig into with you is, from your experience being a leader within a for good organization, obviously, if anything is a constant in our sector, it's change. And as a leader, we need to be able to lead through change. So in light of this, what we're talking about, trying to change this big shift in mindset, how would you coach a leader who wants to adopt this at an organization who may not be yet having these conversations or quite be ready to start adopting this big of a mind shift? Like, what are steps 1 and 2, or what are some things tactically that someone can do to become that change agent internally?
Yeah, I mean, change is like the root of our work. So I don't want to be all self promotiony, but we if you're familiar with the term liminal is like the study of liminality is like just this study of change and in this space between, right? So the liminal kind of means this space between where you are now and where you want to be. It's that transitional space. And if there's anything consistent about our society right now, it is change. I mean, like I said earlier, I started my business in the start of a pandemic, and like everyone in history probably says there's more change now than there has been in this world, but like this is crazy. This is pretty tumultuous times we're living, whether it's the pandemic or the political scene that we're in or just the societal problems. I mean, change is the definition of our society, right? And so part of the thing we're seeing in the nonprofits that we work with every day is like the nonprofits who are kind of accepting that things are different and been flipped upside down are the ones I think who can kind of innovate towards something different. So on some level, accepting change I think is the first and most important thing you can do as a nonprofit leader is say is nothing is the same anymore. Everything is different. And so now what? And it almost makes you put your everything on the table and say, is the way we're doing things working anymore? Is society changed so much that we need to change our model, whether it's our service model, or the way we're communicating with donors. I mean, the whole I think everything should be on the table at this point. And to me, that's a conversation that is worth having in leadership spaces in for good organizations and in boardrooms and in conversations with consultants. And it should just be a constant. The only thing that should be constant right now is the conversation around what's changed, I think. And and I've spent a lot of time. I mean, the idea of liminality is one of my favorite things in the world, and like so, I've spent a lot of time kind of studying this idea of change and kind of how it processes and what the process that people go through as people and organizations go through as they experience change. But I think embracing it and just accepting it, which I think on some level we think we have, but we still hold on to a lot of stuff from the past. We just want to hold on to things. And so I don't think very many people listening to this will be like, oh, I don't see any change. I mean, we all know there's change, but if we're still holding on to some stuff that we probably shouldn't be holding on to. Or we're holding things sacred that shouldn't be sacred. It's okay to hold on to stuff, but some things just become sacred and we have to evaluate those things as well.
Absolutely. I think far too often we get comfortable with the things that we can control, particularly because so much of the work that we do is out of our control, right? Our funding almost entirely sits on the back of people choosing to give money to get quote unquote nothing in return. Now we know that that's not the case. We know there's value that you give to the donor.
Right.
There's value that you give to an investor in your for good organization, but you're asking someone to give and get no goods in return.
Yeah.
And so there's so much out of our control.
Well, and I think it's a good point. Is conversation we have to have is what is the value proposition of our work?
Right.
I know when you're like, you're selling widgets or you're selling like, iPhone cables, the value proposition is simple. Give us $10, we'll give you an iPhone cable that'll work for 3 weeks. And then it'll, not work anymore and buy more of them. But like for nonprofits and for good organizations, like what is the value proposition? What are like when someone gives us $100 donation, what happens? And if we can't answer that, that's like the most basic thing, right? Like if we can't answer that, then who's going to give us any money? But who's going to fund us? But there has to be value proposition conversation as well. But again, that's going away from business model, which value proposition in the business world is a very normal conversation. Value proposition in the nonprofit space are those conversations being had? It feels a little weird to think about value.
It almost feels dirty to have that conversation.
It almost feels wrong. Yeah. It almost feels like we're like committing the great nonprofit sin. Oh, value proposition. That doesn't seem like it's a safe conversation to have, but it needs to be had.
Right. So in that light, how do you foster that conversation?
Yeah, I mean, frankly, like our conversations with our nonprofits, again, our for good partners. I will try and change my language for leads.
I see you trying.
I'm trying. Our conversations with those partners is like, okay, so where do you want to be in 3 years? Like, what are your hopes? So like 3 years from now, you're sitting around your boardroom. What are you hoping you're reporting? And like that conversation usually leads into a larger conversation around not just fundraising, not just branding, which is what we do branding work, but like it's where are we now and where do we want to be in the future? And you have to start thinking about value proposition. You have to start thinking about growth. You have to start thinking about like income levels and revenue streams. And you have to start thinking about things that nonprofits don't necessarily want to think about very much. But if you think like 3 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, you have to start thinking about you're kind of forced into thinking about some of those things. Now, for us, a lot of those conversations that lead back to branding, lead back to messaging, lead back to marketing type things. But there's also conversations around like the way that the nonprofit is structured. Where are the revenue streams coming from? Is it 100% donations? Is there models for revenue that we can build into our work? And so I think that conversation is a good start of like, okay, if we're going to get here one day, how are we going to start then building a roadmap to get there? And it's business plan and stuff.
Yeah, that's such an interesting trend. I hate that I keep using the word trend, but it is a trend that's coming to the for good sector is identifying additional revenue streams.
Yeah, it's interesting. We talk a lot about when nonprofits start up, especially like donor focused nonprofits, where like somebody starts a nonprofit and then they have some influence, they have a wide circle of friends, so their nonprofit grows, and at some like you can grow a nonprofit on a circle of friends. Depending on how great your circle of friends is and how great your privilege is, to a very fairly large size. And we've seen nonprofits grow to $1 million based on a great network, right? But at some point, your network maxes out. Like I've seen a lot of nonprofits that's like they have like $10,000 of revenue and they're doing some
Yeah.
great work, but it's like it's got low impact, right? And you have nonprofits that grow to $1 million on a network, but like the network maxes out. You either need to figure out ways to expand that network, which is what marketing is and what communications is, and what like there are ways to expand that network, or look at grants, or look at whatever, or like look at alternative ways to have other business models like that. Because at some point you hit a max if all you're doing is individual donor dollars, unless you can get big enough somehow where like you become a massive individual donor dollar organization. You just have market share at that point, right? Like like Charity Water, they just have mass market share. I think they're pretty well funded by individual donors, and
Yep.
they've just figured it out. But they're a unicorn. I mean, that doesn't happen to the average nonprofit, and so it's not a model that we can count on. But it's and also interesting is we work with a few community development organizations that are kind of identified as community development corporations, which is really interesting. And there's two in North Carolina we work with, and one here in Oregon, and they are terribly funded by donors. No donors fund those organizations. They're nonprofits. They do nonprofit things, but their name, Community Development Corporation, I think really confuses donors, and so nobody donates to them. But they've therefore been forced to think, how do we fund this thing? Because the donors don't understand it. And so they're very similar things where, I've got a friend in Sacramento who's running a very similar thing around a food hall. Like they're basically starting a food cart pod for their entrepreneurs that they're serving. And it's a business revenue stream for their entrepreneurs. Obviously it's a livable wage for them, and very profitable for them. And it's also a revenue stream for them as a nonprofit, like food networks and food collaboratives. And like, it's just, those organizations have had to get creative because they are built on a model that donors don't understand. And so if you're looking for innovation around like, how do we build revenue streams? I mean, community development corporations are an interesting place to start. How they do interesting things in housing, interesting things around just especially around housing and food is an interesting place in that world. But they've been forced to because they don't have donors. Donors are like, I don't know what you do. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I think what you're touching on here is a valuable output of the mindset shift from traditional nonprofit operating to what I've termed the for good operating model. Again, doesn't have to be that word, but I think we understand the context with it. But is this output of innovation? Innovation has not traditionally been a core value of the nonprofit sector. The nonprofit sector has, hey, we've found a model that works, and we're going to work the model until the model doesn't work anymore.
And we have enough people who still think the model works that we just kind of it's like one of those things. It's a phrase we always use, like it works just well enough to think you should keep on doing it.
Exactly.
Like, it's like the Bears quarterbacks. They work just well enough to think we should keep on having them, right? Like, it's never going to grow your organization into the future, but it's just going to sustain it, and we're going to keep having jobs, and like I'm going to be able to go to work every day, which
Exactly.
isn't a way to live. Which is not. That's the purpose of our nonprofits.
Well, that's not why the organization was started. The organization wasn't started to stagnate in delivery of services. The organization was started to solve a real world problem.
Yeah, I think you look at like going back to change a little bit. Like if you look at what we would refer to as the dinosaurs of the industry, right? Whether it's nonprofit space or whether it's the business space, like the inability to recognize and admit change has become afoot is why we have dinosaurs. Like they had an inability to recognize change, adapt, and reinvent themselves. And so that is, to me, like we look at change and this conversation around change and innovation. Like if you cannot admit that change has happened, that the world is different now, you will not innovate, and you will kind of eventually become a dinosaur of sorts. And I don't want to get too far into nerdy stuff, but like liminality is a super interesting field of study. It talks about separation, right? There is this moment of separation where everything changes. There's this moment of a season of margin where like you're lost in the desert, you have no clue what's going on. And then there's a reaggregation that comes through, right? So it's separation, margin, reaggregation. And like, if you can faithfully walk through that process, both either as an individual, whether like when I was laid off, it was a season of separation, margin, and then I decided to reinvent myself and become a consultant. It was like, but like I would never be sitting where I am now and leading the company I'm in now if I didn't just accept and embrace that. And I fought against it really hard. But like innovation happens in that season of margin. Innovation happens in that place where you're like, I have no clue which way is up. I feel lost in the desert and like I don't know what to do. That's when innovation happens. And people hate margin. People hate that space where it's confusing. So we get out as fast as we can. We do whatever we can to like push against it and get back to some sense of equilibrium, right? And the more we try to get back to equilibrium of what used to be, the less we can innovate because we just are not looking forward, we're just looking backwards. And so I'd say like the ability to like sit in margin is what I think brings about some of the most innovative situations. Not even just admitting there's change, but sitting in the margin, sitting in like the unknown and the confusion and saying like, okay, I accept this craziness. Now that we're here, like what actually is that? Because everything's on the table when that happens. I was unemployed for a couple of years, and like you go from thinking I'm going to get a job in one place to like I'll take a job anywhere at this point. Like I almost took a job building websites for credit unions, and I was like, I'll do whatever it takes. You have to start getting more and more creative. Not that there's anything wrong with building websites for credit unions, but they're not. They're not nonprofits. They might be for good. I don't know. But like being able to sit in that margin allows you to think is super creatively because you just everything's on the table and you have to start innovating or else you'll never get out or you'll go back to what was comfortable and just do the same old thing and kind of like have no impact and it might not be for good.
Todd, there's so much meat to what you were just talking about, sitting in the margin and finding ways to creatively innovate. How would you coach someone who may be finding themselves sitting there right now, like facing that out of necessity or wanting to step into that? Someone finds themselves there. How can they start to navigate that? What kind of questions can they ask either themselves or of the people around them to foster that innovation that will deliver opportunities like new service models or new revenue streams or new ways to provide impact?
Sure. Yeah. I think the most important thing someone can do when they're sitting in that like margin, whether it's personally or organizationally, and sometimes those things are tied directly together, right? I think guides are one of the most important things in that journey. Like finding someone who's been there before, who is not judgmental and isn't going to try and solve your problems for you, who can like sit with you and be like, it's okay. Welcome to the real life. And to almost normalize that what you're experiencing and let you know that like, you're not alone. I don't mean to make everything back to me personally, but like I just remember when I was going through my season of margin, I sat down with a couple of friends and we were this guy I just met and this other guy, and I was kind of telling them my story, and they're older than I am, and they both just kind of laughed at me, and not in like a judgmental laugh, like you're such a loser way, but just like, ha, 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 welcome to being 40, man. Welcome to leadership. Welcome to entrepreneurship. Like why you are in the right place. And there's something powerful, I think, when you're in margin, when you're in the unknown of just kind of knowing that like this has been done before. You are not like this unique butterfly who's experiencing this for the first time. Now, the experience itself might be very unique, but like the reality of that separation and margin and like that this brokenness is so normal.
I love that. When you're choosing to find ways to innovate, choosing to step into change and embrace change, it changes it from a scary thing to an exciting thing.
Right. Yeah, it takes it from like I'm gonna do what's safe to I'm gonna take a risk, right? Like when you're reacting to things, it's usually you do what's safe. But when you're able to sit and be like proactive, it's like, okay, I'm gonna intentionally take this risk now. And I don't I don't mean to make this whole podcast like sound like a therapy session, but like on some level, like leadership is therapy. Like leadership and therapy probably they go hand in hand. And healthy leaders make healthy decisions, and healthy leaders are able to sit in margin, and healthy leaders are able to find in their ego is checked and their ego is gone, and we make better decisions as leaders when we are healthy people, right? And so yeah, again, I think that that kind of directs us, puts us in the right direction, and we're able to kind of be more proactive than reactive.
Well, Todd, this has been an awesome conversation. I think we've covered so much between leadership and change and innovation and mindset shifts. So I'm going to close us with one final question. And this is a bit of a broader question, but in light of our conversation on change and innovation and What is a change you see coming to the for good sector that you're really excited about?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think on some level, these conversations around nonprofits taking themselves more seriously, and it almost goes back to your original comment around nonprofit and for good, right? Like the Dan Plata video that popped up, it was like I felt like it was in like 2004, right? Of around like capacity and like staffing and how much we spend versus how much we like percentages and all that kind of stuff. Like the more that nonprofits can take themselves seriously and present themselves seriously, I think we're going to be better off, not just as a industry or like a sector, but like the world will be better off. Like I have a genuine belief, and this is I don't say this because it's like our business depends on it, but like I have a genuine belief that nonprofits are most able to
Hmm.
address society's
Hmm.
problems than anybody. Like they're the ones who are closest to the ground. They're the ones who are dealing with, like, my wife works for an emergency shelter. She works for for folks like who are dealing with house issues, and like if you want to know about, like, Portland has a significant problem, in this place. But if you want to know about
Hmm.
that problem, go ask those folks. Like, don't ask the politicians, don't ask the people in power, don't ask the people in Salem or in Washington D.C. about it. Go ask my wife and her coworkers around housing challenges, right? So in every single sector we have, whether it's housing or food security or vulnerable populations, whatever it is, like I think nonprofits are most equipped to solve our problems, and they just have to take themselves seriously. Like it just really frustrates me sometimes. This is a bit of a rant, I think, but like when I look at nonprofits and I hear about their work, and then I like go to their website or like look at their marketing, I'm like, wait a minute, it doesn't make any. It looks like you're doing incredible things, but you obviously even aren't taking yourself seriously on some level. And so like this conversation around, can we spend money on branding? Like, spend money on branding and marketing. I love seeing a movement where nonprofits like begin to spend money on presenting themselves seriously and getting clarity around what they do so that people can invest more money in their work. I always think, why should like the consumeristic goods that probably make society worse be all slick and branded, and nonprofits that are doing incredible work look like they were created in 1994 with clip art? Like, and I don't think it's just about cool branding. It's about, let's present ourselves professionally and be a professional industry that says, listen, we are doing great stuff. We're doing great work. Take us seriously. And so to me, there's a move. I think we see more organizations who are saying, no, we really need to make sure our marketing, our messaging, and our
Hmm.
brand matches our work. And they need to kind of level up a little bit. And I've seen more of that, but just whole conversation around like, hey, let's take ourselves serious as an industry and not just be like the little cute, oh, it's so cute you run a nonprofit, to where like it's, oh, you're working in the for good space. Like,
Hmm.
you're like, what you do actually matters in our society more than like my company that sells window blinds. Again, nothing against window blind salesmen if there's any listening, but that's probably the biggest rant that I can go off of, and so I hope I answer that. But that's a good direction in my mind. If we can see more of that, and I don't just mean because that makes my business work better, it's because I think that our world needs that. Our world needs to be moved to like recognize nonprofits and for good organizations as change makers in our society and take them seriously.
Todd, I think I can't think of a better way to close, is that inspirational thought of being proud of the work that we do and not feeling like, oh yeah, I work at a nonprofit is somehow admitting to being a lower tier of a professional or a lesser professional. But in fact, like, I work in the for good sector.
Yeah,
Like,
it's not at all. It's
exactly.
Yeah, it's a better tier of professionalism, I think, honestly. Maybe not better. Maybe we shouldn't like put values on it, but like it's extremely important.
When we change our mindset and say, every day I go to work and make the world a better place, this is the only sector that can confidently say that, right?
Yeah,
So,
100%. I
and
hope so.
that's
And if it's not, then maybe it's your organization has a
exactly.
problem. But yeah, like
Right.
absolutely, it should be the only sector we can say that across the board. Some businesses do that. There are a lot of great businesses that do work for good. Like
Yes.
there is, like there's a lot of that out there, and we applaud that, and I love that. But that's more rare than it is. They're not doing negative things, right?
Right.
There's a lot of businesses that are doing fine things, they're doing important things, they're not doing negative things. But like there is a for good side of the nonprofit work
Mhm.
that is different, and it
Yes.
stands out.
So, Todd, as we close here, if our listeners are nodding their heads like I've been, or ready to lean in, where are some good places for them to connect with you?
Yeah, so we're on, the internet. I'm not sure if you've heard of it.
Don't know what
It's
that is.
pretty cool. Just go to http www. I don't even know how to do it anymore. No,
No.
our website's meetliminal.com. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on all the platforms. I'm sure it'll
Awesome.
probably be in the show notes. But we're trying to get to a few conferences this year. So if you're going to N10 in Portland here in March, we'd love to see you.
Awesome.
But yeah, I mean, I'm a Gen Xer, so I'm on every platform possible. But I don't post as much as I used to. So, but I'm definitely paying attention.
Awesome. Well, Todd, thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah, thank you. This is great, David.